This particular PowerPoint is going to be helpful to you for a couple of reasons. One is that as an advanced practice nurse, aware of and responsible sometimes for the health of a population, you should be aware of initiatives that are currently happening that will be affecting the health of populations. And secondly, it's going to be really helpful because you need to refer to some of these initiatives in the final paper that you're writing. If you look at the grading rubric, it has a requirement that you include Healthy People 2020, plus looking at some of the initiatives at the federal or the more local levels. This slide gives some of the history of Healthy People. It actually started in the late 1980s and 90s, and they simply called it Healthy People when they decided it would be important to actually start setting goals for the population, for the health of American population by the year 2000. So it was called Healthy People, and the goals were set for 2000. Then at that point, they decided to add Healthy People 2010. It was possible because of increased technology to start getting more and more data so they could actually start to form a baseline of where the health of Americans were, and then set more specific goals for how they could improve on that baseline by the year 2010. They did the same thing in 2020. Again, changing the title to Healthy People 2020. By this time, they greatly expanded it to 1,200 different objectives and 42 topic areas. And now I just looked a little bit ago, Healthy People 2030, I think it lagged a little bit because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but I see that there's information now on the website about Healthy People 2030. I haven't included much of it into this class yet because I think it's new, but I see that one change that they did make seems like they believe that they overextended the complexity on 2020. And so they've actually reduced many of the objectives and decided to hone in on the ones that they think are most urgent for the American population. And they are marking the 2030 website with things that they might have retained as just baseline data. In other words, they're not collecting new data, but they do have some baseline on that topic, and which objectives they will be continuing to gather data on and setting new goals for the year 2030. This slide, I list the 4 Healthy People 2020 goals. And in the notes section below this slide, I give just a link to an image of what the model looks like for a socio-ecological view of health. That's going to be important in the writing assignments in this class, to make sure that you understand that socio-ecological view of health. So please make sure that you take a look at that. Please take the time to open up this link and look at how they determine which of the indicators would be the leading health indicators. Looking at the link in the notes section can probably explain this better than I can, but in Healthy People 2020, they have foundation health measures in 2 different tiers. The first one is healthy life expectancy. How long could someone be expected to live given the current morbidity statistics and the current health statistics in the US today? The second tier is a summary of life expectancy where they separate out the measures from the overall summative one above. And they separate them into 3 things. What are the restrictions on activity, the impact of disability, and the self-reported summary of health status? Again, it's too much for me to explain, but if you go to that link, it explains it better. Here, I take a peek at the goals for Healthy People 2030. Again, I think in the next months and probably the next year, year and a half, we'll be finding out more about how Healthy 2030 is different from Healthy 2020. For a number of you in the class, this initiative called Step It Up at the federal level might be something that you will want to include in your final paper, and certainly you should be aware of it. I give in the notes section a flow of how I would approach looking at this website, starting with the background information and then looking at barriers and then strategies and resources. Report put out by the CDC is so full of information. I am sure you'll want to click on it, open it up, start exploring it, and particularly focus on what could be helpful to you in your final population health paper. What are the health concerns for particular subpopulations that you've chosen to write on in your paper, and how can some of the information here be useful to you in that analysis? National Prevention Strategy is also another initiative that any advanced practice student finishing a course in population health should be aware of. The goal is to increase the number of Americans that are healthy at every stage of life. Around the outside of this schematic are 7 other goals. And then around that hub are 4 strategic directions for the activity. One is to promote a healthy and safe community environment. The other is to focus on preventive services in the community. The third is to do what can be done to eliminate health disparities. And the fourth is to empower the people living in that community. On this slide are examples from other student papers of how you could write a community health problem statement. So they might be helping you, but just keep in mind as well that you can always run that by me and see if that is helpful if you're struggling with trying to pull that together in your paper.